All right. I'm Joel Gausten, joelgausten.com. I'm here with someone I've had the pleasure of knowing for quite a few years now, a fellow New Jersey native currently living
Yeah.
in Nashville, Mr. Fred Schreck.
Yes. Hello.
It's
Hello,
great.
Jersey. I
What's
miss
that?
you. I said hello, Jersey. I miss you.
Yeah, I miss Jersey too. I'm up here
Yeah.
in New Hampshire, so
Uh-huh.
there's something about the Garden State that always pulls us back in some
I
way.
really can't pinpoint it, but yeah, there's no place like it.
Excellent. Well, great seeing you. We have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
At the top of my list, and I'm sure at the top of your list as well, is some really exciting news. For those who don't know, Fred has been a singer for a number of bands, one of which was a band called The Ancients from New York City. They were very active in the early 90s. One of my personal favorite bands from the era. The Ancients did an amazing self-titled album in 1990, early 91, that has been out of print for about 32, 33 years, roughly. And on July 17th, which is my birthday, actually, that album is being reissued digitally, which is very exciting. So I want to kind of start there. It's been a long time since that album's been in the world and
Mhm.
current form. Why was now the right time to put this music back out into the universe?
Well, it was always an intention of mine to re-release it somehow because with the other two being out there and available, some of the old fans asked me, well, this is your second and third album. I don't think I've ever heard the first one. So I mean that's how it started, and then I was discussing it with Morgan Visconti. We said, yeah, let's do it, but let's sort of see what we could do to sort of maybe just update it a little bit, dust it off. I didn't want to change the vibe of it. I didn't want to change the production, but let's listen to it again with new, fresh ears, because I don't think I even went back and listened to it for quite a while. And it is what it is. It's a time capsule. Um, but I really kind of I was really kind of impressed with how relevant it seemed to me again, and there's even, as I understand, as all the kids are telling me, including my daughter, there's this whole resurgence of that sort of goth industrial vibe out there now, and she said, oh, that would fit right in. So I said, well, why not? I think it's a great time to do it, and it is an album that's very personal to me, and it is actually the first time I actually met Morgan. I met Morgan as a young 18-year-old guy, who was living in New York for the first time, and he it was one of the first songs that he mixed. Was the "Release Me" from the album, which was kind of the single from there. So he from there we made this we had this great friendship where we wrote music together, and not only for the Ancients but for other acts, and for the Billygoats in Nashville and other projects. So he's been a lifelong, sort of almost lifelong partner in all of this, but his excitement sort of fueled this. He started messing with it a little bit and enhanced some of the old mixes, and we dug up some of the redone versions of it that we were going to release with the Mind sessions. So we just kind of we did this crazy sort of disco version of "Release Me," and we did this sort of Tom Waitsy kind of slow bluesy version of "Guilt Machine." And we said, why don't we put those on the record and kind of update it? Plus, there was a track that we used to do back in the day called "The Fire" that was sort of the centerpiece of our set, and we never released it. So we found that version, we dusted it off, Morgan remixed it, and now that's part of the record too. So it's really cool, and it's we're very excited. And
Excellent.
with that, we were able to coax some of the old original members of the live band back together to do a few live shows. They're kind of in the works. We're trying to nail down the definite dates. I can tell you that we are playing in New York City on August the 30th at the Berlin Under A, very intimate club. But I think that's the best way to see us. And besides, I'm not sure my voice would project that far anymore. uh, but yes, there's also a gig in Nashville and in Atlanta in October. So more to come on that. But there's going to be a handful of live performances. I don't know if that'll translate into anything further, but I felt it was important to not only release this record, but do some more shows before I really lose the capacity to do it, the right way. And, time is not on my side anymore, or anybody's really. So, you know, we're just, we had so much fun playing together this last weekend, this last few days. It really, and if we got together and the energy wasn't there, I might have second guessed it, but I'm all in now. I can't
Excellent.
stop.
So who comprises the current 2023 incarnation of the Ancients?
Okay. Well, in the terms of the live act that you're going to see, we are going to have our original guitar player who played with us back then, Albert Zampino, who has been in my various bands and projects over the years. He was in the original Shoot the Doctor band, which was kind of the prototype to the Ancients. He was the guitarist for the Ancients back then, and I followed him here to Nashville. Actually, he's a good friend, and he's going to take the guitar chair. Diane Galliano, also known as Ramshi, she's a yoga teacher. She is the bass player, and she was the bass player back then. She was she was the co-owner of the Luna Lounge and the Mission, where it all started. I'm very excited to have her aboard. Of course, Morgan Visconti, who is the original keyboard player and synthesist, and Frank Coleman from Satellite Paradiso will be sitting on the drum throne for us.
And of course, being in New England for quite a few years now, a lot of us up here know Frank from the Bentmen.
Bentmen. Absolutely.
So, and he's a lovely guy, and he's got all kinds of cool projects under his own steam as well. So that's really exciting.
He is tireless, man. I don't know where he gets the energy, but he's always doing something, man. And it's always something good. It's always quality work. Oh, wow. I just don't know how he does it,
Yeah.
But he's an amazing guy, and he's an amazingly fun person to work with. That's for sure. You're going to meet him in a little bit. I'm going to drag him upstairs. He's here right now.
Cool. We're going to have other Ancients jumping in momentarily, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I want to kind of set the stage for people who may be hearing about the Ancients and you for the first time via this video.
Yeah.
And it kind of gives some context. Like I said, you're a New Jersey native. You had been performing in bands for quite a while. I guess it was like the late 70s onwards, right? That's when you first.
Yeah, it was. I got the bug very early, and not only just bands, just doing original music was something I have done since the age of 15 or 16. I had a long-term band with some high school mates. We had a band called Witch's Promise. It was a progressive metal band back in the mid to late 70s, and it was very when I heard Metallica years later, I was like, yeah, that's what we were doing. We were kind of doing that really dark sort of metal stuff. And almost all the projects I was involved with after that were all sort of original bands. I mean, I can sing, and I always got roped into doing some kind of cover thing, but it was usually just for a few bucks for, party money. But, my passion was always to create and write music and produce it someday.
Absolutely. And we're going to fast forward a little bit to the late 80s, which was kind of interesting because you had mentioned Shoot the Doctor a minute ago. And there's an interesting sort of factoid with Shoot the Doctor in that you got some television exposure via Star Search.
No sense in trying to hide from it now.
I'm sorry.
No, it's been, you can't hide from it. It's been, we have YouTube, and that's it. You just acknowledge it, and it was an interesting experience. I mean, who could blame us? We were, we were wanting to get, noticed. And back then, bands, their biggest goal was to, get signed to a label. And, the DIY thing didn't really happen until a few years later. And so, but we were getting all this attention, and we thought it was like a good move. It was a democratic move. I was not really, I was leery about it, but I went ahead and agreed to do it. And we were on there for 3 episodes, and I think we were probably the most unique band they ever saw on that show. Uh, and after that, our chances just sank. So that was it. No one would touch us. And that caused a lot of strife within the band, and finger pointing and all that other stuff. And at that point, I met Rob Satcher, who was the owner of the Mission, which was a really cool little club that I used to frequent back down in the East Village in the early 90s. And struck up a friendship with him. And he's just kind of a visionary, that guy. He just kind of convinced me it was probably a good idea to kind of move on from it and just tear, just no pun intended, tear it down. Just, kind of start with the bare minimum, and that's what that record is. That is a bare essence record. That makes sense. That's just my voice with minimal sort of instrumentation. I did get some help from some notable people. Paul Ferguson, I had just met him from Killing Joke. I was a fan of his for years. He came and programmed some drums for us. He had a great, on the song Tear It Down, he had this idea of sampling a bowling ball hitting a wood floor. And that is the bass drum sound on that intro. It's
Really?
so powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And John Carruthers played on House of Pain, and he was the one of the guitarists for Siouxsie, and later the guitarist for Crush, another band I was involved with. Also, all over the record are Psychedelic Furs, which, interestingly enough, my career was always kind of tied to members of that band, not the primary members of the band like the Butler brothers, but Knox Chandler played cello on Release Me, and Joe McGinty, great keyboard player, does the Sid Gold's Request Room. I think he started all that, all those crazy little clubs downtown, and he did most of the keyboard work on that record. So interestingly enough, later on, I hooked up with John Ashton to do the Satellite Paradiso thing. It's like, every couple of years I'm just destined to work with one of the Psychedelic Furs, which is great. They're all very fine people. Just great musicians, and I was so humbled that these people actually took the time to help me.
Yeah, and the results were fantastic. As I've said to you in other conversations, that album for me
Mhm.
was really kind of a gateway to the New York scene, because I was a little too young
Mhm.
at clubs at that time. I
Yeah,
started going out around 93, so I just kind of
right.
missed it. But I would read the East Coast Rocker, and I'd read zines, and
John Reynolds, he was one of the he used to, he loved Shoot the Doctor, but he was he helped me out a lot, with
man, that's a name I haven't heard in 30
John
years.
Reynolds.
John
Yeah,
Reynolds. Wow, that brings back a lot of memories.
yeah, partied with him a few times. He was an animal.
Yeah, he was a cool guy. We actually exchanged some letters when I was in the 8th grade. I used to write him letters, and he'd write back, and
Yeah, good guy.
yeah, yeah. So, he was another conduit for me, because I was so enthralled with this scene that I wasn't able to physically be in at that time, but I was just soaking up as much as I could as far as information and the music and the records. And from my 13, 14-year-old perspective in those days, it seemed like New York at that time was kind of a vibrant spot, in that there
It
was
was.
such an eclectic crowd. There was you guys, there was Warrior Soul, there Circus of Power, Blitzspear, the Lunatics, White
Right.
Zombie was popping around at the
Yes.
you know, for those of us,
Prong. Do you remember Prong with
oh yeah,
yeah.
I know those guys quite well, actually.
Yeah, I like they were like like about my favorite band back then. I really liked them a lot, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I still talk to Troy Gregory now and
Do
then.
you? Yeah.
Sweetheart of a guy. But yeah, that's exactly to my point. There was a lot of different music kind of converging, and there were some great clubs. And but you were obviously a participant, and I was an observer. So I have to ask you, as a participant,
Yeah.
how would you best characterize the spirit and the vibe of New York City in those days?
I view it as probably the last or next to last great, cultural music scene in New York that I remember. It carried on into to like the early 2000s with the Luna Lounge and stuff. There was some stuff going on, but that period of the 90s, the late 80s into the mid 90s was really magical. It really was. It really was. And I kind of think that I was too young. I was like you. I was an observer back when Max's Kansas City was like the place to be, and the New York Dolls were playing there. And the early days of CBGBs. I got down there to see some of some of the original acts, but they were already, kind of famous at that point. I wasn't there at the inception when Hilly Crystal opened up the club. I did get to play there a lot of times, but yeah, I kind of was in your place in the kind of late 70s. And that scene that I was privileged to be a part of was, in my mind, probably the last time that was the mecca for that kind of culture. So yeah, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. I wish you
Man,
could have been part of it, but you know what? You ended up kind of part of it anyway, really.
yeah, and I had my time a little bit later, because I by the mid '90s I was doing, yeah, that next generation. Coney Island High was the club, the
Right.
Continental. It was kind of like that next wave. Pre 9/11, there was a
Right.
window where things were kind of happening, and there were awesome bands coming up like D Generation, and you know,
I think that that there would have been another wave of that had 9/11 not happened. I think that just kind of it screwed a lot of things up, but that was one of them. Maybe
yeah,
not the most important thing, but you know,
definitely a change.
changed everything. Really changed everything. Just everything on the planet.
Yeah. But we can't have any conversation about New York without mentioning Joey Ramone,
Oh, of course.
who I
Dear.
know had a special relationship with you and a special
Yes.
relationship with the Ancients during that time.
Yes. Yes. He was. I was blown away. I got a phone call from Rob, who was managing the band at the time, telling me that he got a phone call from Joey Ramone. He's like, "This is Joey, and I want to talk to you about the Ancients, and give me a call." That was it. And before I knew it, he was down at one of our first rehearsals, and I have a picture of that day. I actually asked Paul Ferguson to play drums because we hadn't even had a drummer yet, and we did a little showcase for Joey at our rehearsal studio. And I was so nervous, but he was just a dude, man. He was just a great, he was so friendly, again, generous, just generous of spirit, unassuming, and handed me his phone number on a little scrap of paper, which I still have. And he really, really, really tried to help us. He believed in the band a lot, and I mean, he's done that for a lot of other people, but I know that if you're one of those people, you feel pretty special. Even if you didn't attain the sort of notoriety that you'd hoped for, you're still, man, you could still say, hey, Joey Ramone dug us. you know and that's in print. Rob wrote a book about that, a whole chapter about the Ancients and our experience with Joey. And there was a funny moment that he highlights in that book where we used to go up to Joey's apartment over there on Houston Street. It was a neat little place. It was just full of little Japanese toys and stuff. You know, it's just a one-bedroom apartment, very, like I said, unassuming. You would never think this guy was a big rock star, you know. But we hung up there and did a interview with a radio station out in the Midwest somewhere, and they decided to call in and loop in Handsome Dick Manitoba. They woke him up out of a dead sleep, and the two of them just proceeded to do this comedy show, man. And we were just all rolling on the floor laughing. I wish I had a tape of it, man, because it was some serious comedy, man. It was just, and it's so surreal for me sitting there watching this transpire. It wasn't even about the ancients anymore. It was about, you know, Joey and Handsome Dick having this, you know, this exchange with each other. Of course, they're busting each other's balls, you know. It was funny. It was great. And that, you know what? I wouldn't trade anything for that, you know, for that experience.
Oh no, no, absolutely. I mean, that's a New York tale
Yeah,
right there, if there
yeah.
ever was one.
So
You
yeah,
know,
dear Joey.
absolutely. Very much missed, very much missed.
Absolutely. Yeah, he was. He is.
Um, I want to
Icon.
dive back into the album for a minute,
Yeah.
and specifically the track "Release Me," because
Mhm.
as I've told you privately, you know, for me, there are songs of the era that really knocked me over and got me to love that era of music. So, songs that come to mind would be "Cuts You Up," Peter Murphy.
Oh yeah, me too.
Yeah, right. More by the Sisters of Mercy.
Uh,
The album that Love and Rockets had at the time, the self-titled one.
Great one. Yeah.
And your album, and specifically Release Me. I would put that into the same category of stuff that was knocking me out at that time. So I want to talk specifically about that song, because that song was, as you said, it was a single. There was a promo clip. What can you tell me about the genesis of that particular tune and how Release Me, you know, came to be such a high point on that first album?
Well, first of all, I'm very flattered that you put me in the same categories of as those other people. That's very flattering, and I thank you for that, um, sincerely. Um, you know, it was the newbie out of that collection, because if you were familiar with any of the Shoot the Doctor stuff, there were songs that I had in that collection that I wrote for that band that I wanted to do on this record, but I didn't want it to be all like redone songs from that. I took a few really good ones, or the ones that were important to me, like Guilt Machine and House of Pain and Tear It Down. Tear It Down, I should have gave Guilt Machine that treatment, because that's a really, I mean, almost a different song, and it was more appropriate for the record. But anyway, this is my wife and daughter are coming in from a vacation, so I apologize for any noise. But anyway, so Release Me was the song that I wrote during the actual session. It was the last song, the newest song, and it was the first time I was not like writing a song with any band mates in mind. I was kind of making this record on my own, really. It was, for all intents and purposes, it was my first sort of solo record. You know, I had help from other people, but it was kind of like me and the producer were driving the ship. So I just came up, I just, you know, like a lot of other songs, I had that melody in my head, and you know, the lyrics just, funny thing about that kind of stuff, if I stress about it and think I gotta fill, you know, I've got to write this song, it never comes out well. But the best songs sort of write themselves, and I feel like I just grabbed the whole thing out of the ether. You know, I felt like, uh, you know, the words just kind of fell into place, and was certainly the song that a lot of people who heard the record said, well, you know, that's the one that I hum all the time.
Mhm.
And you know, when I wrote it, and I've done this with a few times, I wrote it, I said, oh, this has got to be, I know there have been other songs with that title, but the melody itself is like, am I sure that that hasn't been a song already? I do this to myself all the time. And I'll ask around, I'll ask people that actually do that for a living, musicologist people, you know. I'll say, hey, does this sound familiar to you? And they'll be, no, not really. You know, I mean, there's other things like it, but that's kind of unique. You know, the vocal approach is something I've never heard before. So yeah, that's how it came to be. And we decided it was the best representation of the record, and we did a little video for it, and that's still kind of circulating around, but we have a new version of it now, which is I'm pretty excited about. We call it the Limelight version, and it's a much more disco version, a little bit more fun. And we are making a video for that right now. That's going to be the single again, but the different version. The original version is intact. It will be on there, but there will be a different take on it.
Cool. And there are some different takes elsewhere on this reissue. You kind of reconfigured a couple of other tracks, correct?
There is the song Guilt Machine, which was originally a Shoot the Doctor song. And at the time, I remember thinking I wasn't really satisfied with that one. That was the last one we sort of recorded. And I was trying to think of a different way to think of it. And it just came out the same sort of arrangement, only not as good as the way we did it, when Shoot the Doctor. So later on in the Mind sessions, we revisited that song. We were going to do just a different version of it, kind of a slower, kind of piano driven, more like a back room in a bar, but still very dramatic. And we did that version. It was very bare bones. And I always said, well, I really like that version. If we ever re-release the record, we should put it on there, And got to, Morgan sort of gave it his personal treatment. And I said, you know what, let's just open the record with this thing. And we kind of jumbled the track listing a little bit to feature that song, the new version of Release Me. And there was a song called The Fire that we used to do live that people really loved. It ended up being like sort of the centerpiece of our set, but we never released it. It was kind of written after the first record had come out and never made it onto the second one. So we thought it was appropriate to put it on the original record. So
cool. So with this first Ancients album from 91, as you said, that was mostly you and the producer, and he had some guests come in, Big Paul.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So was the live band kind of put together after the fact, or was there a live band before the album and the album was just decided it was going to go in that direction?
No, the live band came after the fact. And, when you start playing these songs live, you're trying to chase the sound on the record and everything else initially. And then you end up with something far better, because you're playing with other people and they're contributing and they're putting their stamp on it. And that's the exact same thing is happening right now. All these years later, I'm jamming with these guys, the record's out, and we're just, well, how are we going to do this live and this live? And this is with songs with, we're not just doing, for the live shows, we're not just doing the first record. We're going to do songs from Leveler. We're going to do some from Mind. And these guys never played these songs, and we're kind of playing and we're trying to chase the record a little bit. And then it's like, well, why don't we try this way? What's the point of playing live if we're going to do everything sounds exactly like the record? I mean, there's a fine line, but sometimes when the band starts playing, I'm thinking, wow, I really wish I'd have released this version of it, because it sounds so, so fresh and, alive, Sometimes when you're in the studio, you kind of cheat. You're like, I'll just throw this in here because it's so easy. To those of us that record, so I'll just, punch up this sound and put this here, and I'll play producer for a while. And there's nothing that replaces a live band. Nothing, man. The live experience is something that I'm afraid like it's almost a lost art, I mean, of course, I'm a little long in the tooth, so I really don't get out much. I'm sure there are great live bands out there. I just don't see them, but I do miss that. I do miss the representation of the album from, in a live format. It's usually more energetic. It's more, because you have to compensate for the production, that you do in the studio. You have to compensate. And if you're with a good group of people, that could be a real magical experience,
Yeah, absolutely. From my own perspective, I think recording versus live have their own unique advantages and disadvantages.
Mm-hmm. They do.
Obviously, when you're recording, you can perfect it, but I always found, maybe just being a drummer, I've yet to replicate live in the studio unless I'm playing live with a band and it just happens to be recorded.
Mhm.
To track something, it's a really special gift to be able to replicate that, from the live setting into a record. It's an art I haven't quite perfected yet after
It's
30.
and it's hard to do it the other way around too. I mean, yeah, I mean, I've kind of been in both situations. When I was a younger musician, it used to be like you had to come up with the money to go to a studio and record yourself, and if you're a primarily live band, you don't know what to do in the studio initially, especially when you don't have any experience. So you're kind of bringing the live band in there and you're trying to recreate what you got going live. That is a hard thing to do. Um, but it's also pretty hard when you've got like this sort of version of something in your head that you did and you put some kind of production into it that sounded great for you at the time, to sort of rethink it. There's a little sort of give and take that goes on when you're trying, your little battle of wills when you're taking studio recordings and you're presenting them to a band. It's because people naturally want to uh do it the way they hear it, and you have to find a happy medium between that, because you want the player to enjoy what he's doing and still represent the song. That's kind of walking a fine line. Does that make sense? I don't even know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, and you've mentioned Mind and Leveler, which are the other two Ancients albums that came much, much later, and we'll
Right.
definitely hit on that in a sec. But
Yeah.
the point is the second album, Mind, came out a long time after the first album.
It.
Um, so going back to the early 90s, you've got this album, you've got the promo video, you've got these, amazing people in your live band, you've got these great players on the album itself. Um, why wasn't there a second Ancients album much sooner than?
Well, I probably would have been uncomfortable answering that, back in the day, but I'm just going to be, candid about it. It wasn't a well-funded affair, and we went out on the road, and we didn't really have any tour support or anything like that. I mean, despite everyone's best effort, it was gonna be a long slog and a long, expensive slog. And I don't know. I guess after that first tour we did, everybody just took a break. And in the interim, I kind of got seduced by an opportunity that I really didn't feel I could pass up. I had an opportunity to sing for a band called Crush, which had Paul Ferguson and John Carruthers in it. And they had this band. And I was like, well, I maybe need to put the Ancients on the back burner, which in hindsight maybe wasn't the smartest thing to do. But, I don't have any regrets. I mean, you do what you do. You make the decisions you make when you make them, and for me at that time, that just seemed like too good a thing to pass up, because I really had a lot of respect for those guys. I wanted to play with them, um, and I learned a lot. It's always a learning experience, man, So by the time that fizzled out, and it fizzled out very quickly, I decided to revisit the whole Ancients thing. I actually wrote some songs for Crush that never got released. So here again, I called up my buddy Morgan, and we just started recording, the two of us. So instead of having a producer and me doing this and bringing in other people, me and Morgan just sat at his. He was working at a place called Crushing, which was kind of a jingle house, and we would go there off hours for about a year and just put down anything that we could come up with, just the two of us. And we realized what a great partnership we had. It was very productive. And that's really like 1993, 1994. And that's when all that stuff was written and recorded. So yeah, we released it so many years later, but it really would have been the natural follow-up to that first thing. And you know, it kind of got, you know, we recorded it, but I think by that point everybody was just burned out. I was burned out. I had to get out of New York, and it's just the way things went. But I never forgot about it. I always listened to it, and just with, I mean, I wish we had gone ahead, and we did eventually.
Definitely. And I want to bring up Big Paul for a minute, because
Yes.
when I was first introduced to the Ancients was
Mm.
actually kind of via Killing Joke, because even at that young age, I was a massive Killing Joke fan. And I
Good
remember
reason.
seeing an ad in, was it Propaganda? It was like one of those cool God scenes at the
Mhm.
time. And it
Yeah.
said the Ancients debut album featuring, ex Killing Joke, Siouxsie and the Banshees. And I'm like, Killing Joke.
Right. And at the
Big
time
Paul.
he was ex Killing Joke. He was not in the band at that time.
Right, that was the Atkins era.
Mhm.
So that was kind of attractive too. It was like, well, what's Paul doing? Because obviously you listen to those early Killing Joke records, and I was a drummer at the time, and I'm like, I was taking drum lessons. I heard What's This For? And the first album, I'm like, I don't need drum lessons. Listen to this guy. So
Paul,
um, yeah,
Paul is like, yeah, Peter Murphy's made a quote. I heard a quote from Peter Murphy, who talked about Paul and said, if you have an army, you want him in it. He is just a force of nature, man. I've never heard anybody drum like him. He's got this unique sort of disco punk approach to things. It's just like I've never heard any drummer play like that. It's like this controlled chaos. It's almost like losing control, but that it's going to come snap right back and just kick you in the teeth. It's man, he is amazing, amazing player. Yeah.
absolutely. So certainly those who would be watching this, who again may be new to the Ancients album and are, fans of Killing Joke, that's another reason I would highly recommend the album. It's got Paul on it, and Paul's been kind of, with you on and off, because as
Yeah.
you put out an album in 2015, I believe it was. That was the Mind album,
Mhm.
which was essentially those songs you and Morgan had worked on in the mid 90s. Paul's on it in a couple of
Yes, he is.
places. That's another wonderful album. And then just last year, you did put out a new Ancients album called Leveler,
Mhm.
which is more contemporary recordings. Um,
Right.
and in the midst of all this, you've done other stuff. We haven't touched on it yet, but you were part of a band called the Billygoats for
Yes.
quite a few years, which was more of a country rock vibe, right?
Kind of an alt country. Yeah. Country in a minor key, which a lot of country fans don't like, but we did it anyway. I said to myself, what was the lamest music I could think of? And I just kind of go in there and destroy it for them. Actually, I love old country music. I do. I love it. I adore, anything that was recorded like in the 50s and 60s and even 70s. I really do. I'm a big fan of that music. But yeah, so yeah, I did come down here and do a stint as a Nashville musician, and here I still am, in Nashville.
Excellent. And you mentioned briefly earlier in the conversation Satellite Paradiso, which is John Ashton's project. Big Paul's on that as well.
Yes,
Sarah Lee. I think Cheetah Chrome is on there too.
she
That
is on there.
album.
I actually recorded that session because he was living here at the time.
Right, right.
Yes. So yeah, I recorded, him here. Yeah. It was and we talked about Joey a lot. We talked about CBGBs, and we talked about Hilly Crystal, and all that stuff. That was pretty cool.
Yeah,
And
I love Steve. It's a great guy.
he is, and I still kind of exchange messages with him a lot. He's on the road a lot now. He's got the kind of revamped Dead Boys, so he's not around here much. But his son lives here in town, so I guess I'll run into him again sooner or later. Yeah.
Cool. So there's a lot of cool music for people who are new to what you've done
Mhm.
to check out. Billy Goat, Satellite Paradiso, the Crush album, which is amazingly 30 years old now.
And
Which I
unavailable. You just can't get it anywhere. It's just I'd like to see that record at least be available for people to to listen to and stream. You know, it's a lost record, unfortunately. But
Yeah,
the video for I can't stop the rain is still on there on YouTube, and I think the rest of the record you could, if you look hard enough, you can get certain tracks off of it.
yeah, it pops up now and then. I had it on cassette. I bought it on cassette when it first came out, and I still have that cassette somewhere
Wow.
here. I think you
It's-
may have signed for me at one point over the years, but um, great record. Yeah, check out that video for The Rain by Crush, and you'll watch it and probably figure out why Fred, you couldn't eat chocolate syrup for about a year after
Oh,
that.
dreadful, dreadful. You know, if you looked at the video and you didn't know it was pouring all over us, it was indeed chocolate. It was a black and white video. I don't know what some people interpreted it as blood, and some people interpret it as like oil because we had this like metal background. And but yeah, during the course of the video, the entire band is being doused by this black yucky liquid, and it's a very messy video. I was picking that crap out of my ears for like 3 weeks, and I could not eat chocolate for at least a year and a half.
I felt sorry for the drums in that video.
You know what I felt sorry for? That gorgeous L5. I don't see how they could have saved that. They had to trash that, you know. I mean, no wonder our budget went so fast. Oh man, that made me heartsick.
They kind of tie it all back around with the ancients.
Hmm.
Um, it has seemed, certainly every few years since the last decade or so, the ancients has come around in some way, whether it be archival music with Mind, newer music with Leveler, and of course now this reissue. Uh,
Hmm.
you've done a lot of different music, and you've worked with a lot of different people. With that said, for you, what is it about the ancients that keeps it something that for you still embrace and come back to, and it's still kind of a living entity in a lot of ways, even now?
That's a great question, man. I think it's because it might be of all the projects I've done, maybe the most personal to me. Um, you know, not I'm not going to go as far as to say that lyrically or otherwise that it's any of it's autobiographical, but I would say that the inspiration for the songs for the ancients have always strongly come from personal experience. And I'm a real studier of humanity. I am my favorite subject is really human frailty, and I feel that is the most liberal environment for me to explore that. And that's something that I just, you know, as my own personal creativity, that's the thing that always inspired me. How frail we are as human beings. You know, we aspire to be these, you know, these excellent figures, and you know we somehow always fall short. You know, but I don't think that that's a bad thing. I just think that that's just the way it's laid out. You know, and that's how, you know, that's our school, that's our classroom. You know, just kind of learning how to be better or more connected or more balanced. Let's just say balance, because I don't, you know, all those other words just seem meaningless now. It's just really, I think this, we all just want to achieve some sort of balance and peace. And so I probably gave you more than you asked for with that answer. But
Well, what I'll add to that, personally speaking, is as I've said to you before, and even in this conversation, that first album, and it's so cool. It's coming out on my birthday. I turned 46 on the 17th,
I'm so happy about that.
and I look back, 30 plus years now, being this very excitable, um, voracious music fan of everything kind of
Yeah.
local, just out of my reach outside the Lincoln Tunnel. I couldn't quite get to the Bowery yet.
Oh
So,
man, I relate to that absolutely.
so to be able to, not only consider the album in the present tense, because there is a new
Mhm.
release of it, but, to have encountered you in my travels over the years, and
Yeah.
Paul and John Ashton, and just all these various people who kind of brought me up and got me to do what I do. It's been a pure joy and a great joy listening to the subsequent Ancients material. I'm always
Thank you so much.
very much a fan of what you do.
Thank you.
Just thrilled this is coming out in a newer form, in a modern form on the 17th. And it's always great to touch base, Fred. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Everybody who's watching this, get the album when it comes out. It's available. I'm assuming when it does come out, it's going to be on all the obvious streaming platforms and what have you.
I have one thing I want to say, about you. You were the person that when I knew that we were going to do this, I wanted to tell you, I mean, outside of the band and the people involved, I wanted you to be one of the first to know that. I know how long you've been following what I do, and I am so grateful to have anyone like you really just appreciate what I do. And you've been such an advocate for my work, and I'm equally grateful to you, Joel.
No, I appreciate that. It's a real joy hearing what you've done and what you're going to be coming up with next. And the feeling's very mutual. And this is an honor to have this conversation about this album that has never stopped impacting me. Have this in 2023. It's the best birthday gift I could have asked for.
Happy birthday, and I'm very flattered. Hey, do you want to meet Frank and Diane real quick? I can bring them up here and say hello. Hey guys, hang on a second. I'm gonna have to fetch them. I think my wife may have kidnapped them. Coming back.
All right.
I had to go fetch them. All right. Well.
Hey, representative of the Joel Gausten fan club here.
How are you?
I'm better now.
Good to see you. It's been
This
a while.
poor guy had such a hard time getting here, man. A bunch of flights were canceled yesterday.
and mine was one of them.
Yeah, and I didn't know. We were all up until after midnight trying to figure out how to get him here, and he pulled it off. And we're so grateful because this guy's a good person to have when you're trying to put together a band that you haven't played with in a long time, because he's tenacious, man. He wouldn't let us leave. He wouldn't let us take breaks or anything.
That total bastard.
Yeah, I kind of put him in charge.
You know what a slave driver I am.
He is. Terrible.
Well, Frank, we're actually recording this for a soon-to-be YouTube video on the album, and it's nice that you were able to join us. So let me bring you into this conversation a little bit. I know you have some history with Fred. I first met you on the Satellite Paradiso tour when that hit Boston. I know you're friends with a lot of the mutuals, of this growing family and of musicians and what have you. So you're involved with this current Ancients incarnation, which is fantastic, and I hope to get to see it when you guys play soon. And you've worked with a lot of interesting folks. When Fred earlier mentioned you were part of this, I said the Bentmen. So
yes,
you've had some unique frontmen in your time. For you, what makes Fred unique and stand out?
Yeah. I got to tell you, I'll tell you something. The other day, I was listening to some rehearsal tapes of us from a couple months ago when we were in New York, and I had to stop and I called Fred and I said, Fred, one of the things that I really appreciate about you as a singer is you sing in key. Which is like somebody saying, what I appreciate about you is that you keep time really well. Which it's not damning with faint praise. It's actually like You'd be surprised.
You're actually, yeah. It's like
Well,
somebody
you know.
telling you you're fairly competent. But
You meet the minimum basic
I
requirement.
I took it, yeah,
Right?
I took it as a compliment.
It was
Yeah,
totally
I
meant
did.
that way. But,
The bar's kind of low, admittedly, but
no, but I mean, the thing is that, Fred's always in the pocket. He always delivers every time. He doesn't just deliver the song, he drives it to your house and installs it, right? Right? So,
uh,
so
so you can see why I,
yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's why it keeps me on staff. Yeah.
So you're talking about the Bentmen, and Frank showed me.
I showed him a little bit.
One of the videos last night.
Yeah.
I had seen some of the videos before. Very unique
Mhm.
ensemble, I would say. But there was what was the name of the track?
I played him Tookie.
My goodness.
The opening thing from when we played the.
I was transfixed. I didn't know really quite what was going on, but I couldn't stop. I had to see how it ended, because I don't think I've ever seen that kind of presentation.
Right.
I'm and I've met Dez, the singer, nice, great guy.
Oh, Des, we hit
had,
off like
yeah, we have a
Yeah.
lot of mutual interests, and we hit it right off. But man, I gotta say, I've never seen Peter Gabriel wear anything like that on stage,
Yeah.
And he dressed as a sperm at one point, didn't he?
Yeah, well, that's true, and this is actual true story. But Steven Tyler from Aerosmith said even I wouldn't wear what those fuckers were wearing.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Local band.
But so there's that, and also, I mean, that's my own thing. But the secret agent thing also is another thing. Is some of the vibes that we were getting into here kind of had a foot in that, and some of it even had a foot in some of the spaghetti western kind of feel. I mean, like we were kind of getting the soundtracky, expansive, cinematic feel there.
This is what I'm talking about when you kind of you chase the album at first, or you chase the track from the album, the recorded studio version, and then all of a sudden you find yourself kind of in this place where you're like, wow, this is going on, and it never occurred to me before. I wish it had before, but it sounds good. We kind of, all the influences from the other projects we've worked on sort of started meeting in this one place. The spaghetti western thing from the Billygoats meeting the secret agent thing, and the satellite Paradiso thing was kind of there already because of me and Frank's involvement with that. And there's nothing like playing with a band,
Yeah.
Even if you're not even playing out, if you're just kind of playing in a room like this, man, it's hours can go by and you don't even realize it.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Again, August 30th is the live return of the band.
Right.
So when was the last time the Ancients actually performed a show? Would it have been 92?
No, we actually when we were recording when we were done recording the tracks that would eventually become the Mind collection, we had a live band that we played a few shows with. There was a club called Indigo, and I believe we played a couple of different places. I don't remember. Mercury Lounge, I think we played. No, nobody was really. It was a different incarnation of the band. It was me and Morgan and a couple of other fellas from New Jersey, Chris Sokalowitz and John Sosha on drums, who was an old schoolmate of mine. And it had almost this more progressive feel to it, like the closing tracks on Mind were all written and recorded with that ensemble. So it was just a different incarnation, and we played a few shows, but at that point, I think we just decided, Morgan and I just decided to table it for a while, and I was on my way to Nashville.
Well, again, Frank, you came in at a perfect time. Fred and I were getting all sappy towards the end there. So,
oh yeah, well, I'm not a sap at all. Just ask my wife. We're saying
this is the only guy I know that actually owns a gorilla suit.
It's true,
genuine.
and in the robot monster sense, not in the furry sense.
You got to see what this guy's apartment looks like. It is like some crazy menagerie of toys and old movie posters. When I go and I hang out, a lot of times when I go up to the city, and Frank always, graciously invites me to stay with him up in
Get in here.
Yeah. We stay up all night and watch like old movies, like old horror movies, like a couple of 12-year-old kids, man. It's
Pretty
like
much.
it's like having a sleepover when I was a kid.
Well, that's what a band is supposed to do. A band is supposed to bond like that. Not just come together for rehearsal, go home, see you later. A band is supposed to like hang out.
That's
get
fun.
stoned
Yeah.
and watch cheap sci-fi and stuff. Yeah.
He lives across the street from the Cloisters, which is one of my favorite places
in Manhattan. Yeah. But yeah, our place is like a cross between, the Addams Family and Pee Wee's Playhouse. It's true, because my wife and I are almost exactly the same person. It's just
Frank grew up in New York theater and television, and so he's had a very unique upbringing. There's no way we would have known each other when we were younger, because I grew up like a working class, bus driver's son in New Jersey. But I think if we knew each other and went to school, we probably would have been really good.
Oh, hell yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, no, I was born in a trunk, as they say.
Yeah, born in a trunk.
It's true.
Yeah.
Uh,
Anyways, Diane coming up here?
I don't know, she's talking with
okay. Well,
it's really great music, and it's really a joy to play it, and the band sounds really great. I mean, even with just a few rehearsals that we've had, everybody's paying attention, just kind of locked in, has taste.
Yesterday's rehearsal went almost 6 hours, which is a long time and then today's was about 4.5. That's why I had to push things back a little bit, because we turned around, we're like, oh my goodness, and we didn't eat.
You get into it and just kind of go,
I promised Joel he'd be meeting some of the original members, but
you want to go get
I guess I'm the only one. Whatever,
Well, so you guys are rehearsing kind of early, because the first gig is what, in 2 months?
Yeah, we need the time.
Right.
Well, trying to coordinate people too.
Yeah, right.
Where we all live so far apart and everything.
I don't want to make the same mistake we made with Satellite Paradiso when we finally got around to rehearsing. And the shows were not just little club shows; they were opening slots for the Psychedelic Furs. At 1,500, 3,000 seat places. So we just we all had this panic attack, and we did this guerrilla rehearsals, this guerrilla rehearsal schedule. I blew my voice out, man, and I had to go up on stage with complete full-blown laryngitis and sing in front of all these people, and open up for the Furs, which was, we pulled it off. We did it, but I don't want to go through that again. I figured let's get started really early, man. Let's since we all live, there's a geographical logistical challenge here. We should get together when we can and start the ball rolling, which I'm glad we did.
Yeah.
So we'll be ready.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure and honor.
You rock, mister. We love you.
Appreciate it.
Love you guys too. Again, Fred, congratulations on the reissue.
Thank you.
And I'm going to make every possible human effort to be there in August to see the show.
There will be CD copies available for it only at the shows, and you will get the if you show up at that show, if you make it from New Hampshire or any of the shows, I got one for you.
All right. I consider that's a deal.
Okay, great. All right. Take care, Joel.
Hey, guys.
Good on, brother. Be well.
Bye-bye.
See you later.